Welcome. Today we're going to look at the work of an economist who posed some really uncomfortable questions about the very foundations of his own field. So get ready to rethink everything you thought you knew from Econ 101. We all learn the basics, right? Firms exist to maximize profit. You and I exist to maximize our happiness or utility. And the market is this beautiful place where it all sorts itself out. It's a really neat, clean model that seems to make sense of our super complicated world. But what if that whole framework, as elegant as it is actually built on some seriously shaky ground? What if it's missing the most crucial parts of how our economy really works? Well, that was the fundamental challenge thrown down by an economist named Oscar Morgenstern. I mean, listen to this. Morgenstern looked over at fields like physics and biology, and he saw them thriving precisely because they were obsessed with their biggest unsolved mysteries. And he argued that economics needed that exact same attitude, that its most important problems were being completely ignored, and that our society's survival might just depend on solving them. So, what Morgenstern did was lay out the field's greatest unsolved problems. He wasn't trying to tear everything down. He was trying to point economics toward the big questions it absolutely had to answer if it was ever going to move forward. And his first major critique really goes for the jugular. It targets this core assumption about how we think people and companies actually make decisions, what he called the myth of full control. See, classical economics is built around this idea called the maximum problem. Imagine you're a single baker deciding how many cakes to bake. You control all the variables, the ingredients, the oven, the price. Your only job is to find that perfect sweet spot to get the maximum possible profit. It's simple, right? Yeah, but the real world is almost never that simple. The second another baker opens a shop across the street, you've lost that full control. Now, your profit doesn't just depend on you, it depends on their prices, their marketing, their choices. You're not just trying to find the best outcome anymore, you're trying to figure out the best strategy against an opponent. And this is how Morgenstern put it. He said the real world isn't one clean problem. It's this messy, confusing situation where everybody is trying to solve their own maximum problem at the exact same time, and all their plans are just crashing into each other. He argued that the math of classical economics just had no tools to deal with that. So, if individual decisions are that complicated, what about the entire market? This brings us to Morgenstern's attack on one of the most famous ideas in economics: perfect competition. Now get this. This quote isn't from some outsider trying to poke holes in the theory. No, this is from Vilfredo Pareto, one of the actual architects of modern economics, admitting that the core assumption of his own model, that free competition is the norm, is, in his own words, certainly false. And if you thought that was harsh, Morgenstern took it way further. He called it a pathological limiting case. Now, that's a fancy way of saying it's such a bizarre, extreme, and unrealistic scenario that it's millions of miles away from the world we actually live in. Basically, it's useless for describing reality. So why is it so useless? Because this standard model of a perfect market leaves out, well, pretty much the entire economy. It totally ignores how governments move huge amounts of money around through voting and spending. It can't really handle monopolies or oligopolies. It doesn't have much to say about things like wage negotiations or the role of pure luck, or even the most fundamental question of all, where do prices even come from in the first place? For these models to be useful, they have to describe a stable system. But Morgenstern pointed out a fascinating fact. Physicists can't even prove with absolute certainty that the moon's orbit is stable, and that's a pretty simple two-body problem. So he asked, how can economists possibly claim they've proven the stability of something infinitely more complex, like the entire American economy? The short answer is, they can't. Okay, so if the old model is basically broken, what's the alternative? This is where Morgenstern championed a massive paradigm shift, one that he actually helped create. It's called game theory. The difference here is absolutely profound. In classical economics, you treat other people like the weather. They're just a condition you react to. But in game theory, you treat them like a chess opponent. They are an active player, and you have to anticipate their strategy. As Morgenstern said, you can't just treat your opponent in chess or poker statistically if you actually want to win. The goal isn't just to find a maximum anymore, it's to find an optimum strategy. And this is the absolute key takeaway. Game theory wasn't just another tool to throw in the old economics toolbox. No way.
It was a completely different way of seeing the entire economic world, a world that's driven by strategic moves and countermoves, not just by people passively trying to optimize things.
Now, Morgenstern laid all this out 50 years ago, so you might be thinking, why does this still matter? Well, because it's arguably more relevant today than it has ever been. What Morgenstern was really getting at is that our economic reality isn't just one simple system. It's a messy, fascinating, and complicated mix of different games all being played at the same time. You've got market competition, sure, but you've also got political processes, corporate bargaining, and a whole lot of pure chance. So his ultimate solution was a call to return to an older, much broader way of thinking called political economy. This is the study of how markets and politics are completely tangled up together. For example, you can't possibly understand energy prices without understanding the geopolitics of oil-producing countries. He argued that a science of mere economics, one that pretends it's separate from politics and power, will always be incomplete. So, the next time you hear an economic forecast or see a model predicting the future, just ask yourself, what's being left out here? Does this model account for the strategic games that corporations and governments are playing? Does it recognize the role of raw power and politics? Or is it still just trying to solve a simple maximum problem in a world that is anything but simple?